Tillis, please.
General Milley, you said that the Taliban had not lived up to the terms of the agreement. Give me a rough date of when they first breached terms of the agreement.
When they
Where you said they were not living up to the terms of the Doha Agreement. What was the first evidence that they were not living up to the terms of the agreement?
Yeah, the memo signed 29 February. So through this, really the fighting season of the summer of 20, one of the requirements, for example.
Okay, so more than a year ago.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Sure.
I don't buy the idea that this president was bound by a decision made by a prior president. This was not a treaty. And it was clearly an agreement where the Taliban were not living up to it. This president, President Biden, could have come in, reasserted conditions, and completely changed the timeline. He's not bound by the president's prior agreements any more than he was bound by the President Trump's decision to exit the Iran deal or the Paris Climate Accords. So that, to me, is a false narrative. I also have to say that this president moving forward with a failed construct has cost American lives, or has cost lives of North Carolinians. We're working on a case with an SIV holder who had a sister who worked for an NGO, Save the Children, and a father who was in the Afghan police force. And as we were working to get through them, the Taliban 2.0 is every bit as ruthless as the one that we replaced in 2001. They sent pictures of the slit throats of people that we were working personally with. They killed this pregnant woman. They killed this police officer. And they are killing countless other people now that we should have gotten out. Secretary Austin, I think we do owe a debt of gratitude to the people that got 120,000, 124,000 people out. It was a logistical success, but this is a strategic failure. General McKenzie. General Miller said 2,500. I've heard you and General Milley also say you agreed with the idea. You personally agreed. You didn't necessarily say that you recommended to the president the 2,500. I understood from General Milley or General Miller that there was a broader context within that recommendation. There were 2,500 fighters, U.S. fighters, but I understand almost 5,000 NATO allies or 5,000 others that were willing to remain on the ground, and as General Miller said, keep the hand on the shoulder of the Afghan National Forces so that we could have a counter to the Taliban. Is that correct, that it was bigger than that? It was in probably the 7,000 range?
Senator, you're correct.
Yeah.
Our NATO allies would have been on board for
And also a CIA presence with bases out there for human intelligence to help us be more precise, more exquisite with the execution of whatever operations we had on the ground?
That is correct, Senator.
Okay. Now, I know that you won't say that you advised the president, but is it fair to say that when General Miller, he said that he advised all of you on his recommendations, it sounds like 2 of the 3 of you agreed with it, is it at least fair to say that in the interagency discussion that those recommendations were made and that in your best military advice, it would have kept the situation stable in Afghanistan?
Well, I've stated consistently that my position was if you go below 2,500, you're going to look at a collapse of the Afghan military. I did not foresee it to be days. I thought it would take months, but the rest of the ecosystem would go out with it too.
Okay.
The NATO partners are going to leave, the interagency is going to leave, and you're going to leave the Afghans by themselves.
Did any of you embrace the notion that the 2,500 plus the several thousand, I think an estimated 5,000 NATO allies and partners who were willing to stay there as well, did any of you agree with the president's assessment that if he acted on that recommendation, that he would ultimately have to send tens of thousands more U.S. service members to Afghanistan? That if we held that one, that it would ultimately just delay the day where we would be back to 100,000 or 50,000 U.S. forces in Afghanistan?
So, Senator, these discussions were occurring in January, February, March. They're separate from the late August discussion, so I want to make that point.
But in your best military judgment, do you believe that the recommendations that General Miller put forth with some 2,500, and I think General Milley said maybe flex up to 3,500, do you believe that that would have sown the seeds for ultimately having to send tens of thousands of U.S. service members back to Afghanistan,
Senator,
as the president has said publicly?
Senator, I believe there was a risk you would incur increasing attacks by the Taliban. That was a risk with holding at 2,500. That was a very clear risk. But I'll tell you, Senator, I'm really humbled recently by my ability to deduce what the Taliban would or would not do, so I think it's hard to know.
Thank you. And next round, I'll get on to the fate of the SIV holders and people that are stranded in Afghanistan. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tillis. Let me recognize Senator Warren, and I'm going over for the vote. Senator Hirono will preside.